So let's talk about rent in the UK, because for the vast majority of people, the situation is absolutely dire, genuinely unsustainable, and getting progressively worse with each passing year. Average rent in London for a basic one-bedroom flat is now pushing £2,000 a month, and that is for somewhere genuinely tiny in Zone 4 or Zone 5, where your daily commute involves 3 different overcrowded trains, a replacement bus service, and possibly a tram, taking 90 minutes each way and destroying your will to live. Manchester is creeping up towards £1,200 for a decent one-bedroom in the city centre. Bristol has gone completely mental with rents matching Manchester despite having fewer jobs. Edinburgh is getting worse month by month. Even places like Reading and Milton Keynes that absolutely nobody actually wants to live in voluntarily. Places with no soul or character or beauty are charging absolutely eye-watering amounts just for the privilege of existing within commuting distance of London. The rental market is completely and fundamentally broken for most of the country, structurally dysfunctional in ways that benefit landlords enormously while destroying renters' quality of life and financial security. Landlords are making absolute fortunes, building property portfolios on the backs of people who cannot afford to save for deposits because rent consumes everything. Renters are spending 50, 60, sometimes genuinely 70% of their gross income just on keeping a basic roof over their heads, with nothing left for saving or investing or living one missed paycheck away from disaster. But here is the thing that mainstream property coverage and lifestyle journalism never talks about honestly. There are cities in the UK where rent is genuinely, shockingly cheap by modern standards. Not just a bit less expensive than London, not slightly more affordable than Manchester, but properly affordable in absolute terms. Rents that sound like they are from 15 years ago. Places where you could rent an entire 2-bedroom flat for significantly less than you are currently paying for a single room in a grotty house share in somewhere fashionable like Brighton or Bristol. These are not villages in the middle of rural nowhere with no jobs or amenities or internet. These are actual cities with proper populations and universities and hospitals and infrastructure and things to do and places to work. And yes, there are reasons they are cheap, usually related to post-industrial decline and economic problems and reputation issues. But if you are desperate to escape the rental trap and you are willing to make some compromises, these places represent genuine opportunities. So let's dive into 10 UK cities where rent is so cheap it will make you question why you are bankrupting yourself in London or Manchester or wherever you currently are. Fair warning though, landlords in these places are not freaking out because rents are low. They are freaking out because demand is so weak they are struggling to fill properties at any price, which tells you something about the challenges these cities face. But if affordability is your priority, if you are tired of having no money left after rent, these cities might just be worth considering. Starting with Sunderland in the northeast, the rent situation here is genuinely mind-blowing, almost unbelievable if you are used to what counts as normal UK rental prices in 2026. Average rent for a one-bedroom flat is about £450 a month. £450 for an entire self-contained private flat of your own, not a grotty room in a house share where you are competing for bathroom time and the kitchen is always disgusting, but an actual proper flat with your own kitchen and bathroom and living space and a front door that locks and privacy. 2-bedroom flats are averaging around £550 to £600 a month. 3-bedroom houses, actual houses with gardens, are £700 to £800 monthly. These are numbers that genuinely sound completely impossible, like they must be wrong or a scam, if you are currently paying London or Manchester or Bristol or Edinburgh prices and watching most of your salary disappear into your landlord's property empire. Let me put this in perspective with some actual comparisons. A room in a shared house in Clapham or Brixton costs about £800 to £900 monthly now. A room, not a flat. A room where you share facilities with strangers. For that same money in Sunderland, you could rent an entire two-bedroom flat and have £200 left over. The rent for a grotty studio in Manchester, about £1,000 monthly, would get you a three-bedroom house in Sunderland with money left over for bills and food. It is not just cheaper, it is transformatively, life-changingly cheaper in ways that fundamentally alter your financial situation and possibilities. The city's population is about 275,000, so it is genuinely a proper city with substantial infrastructure and services, not some tiny village or town that is barely functioning. There is a proper university, Sunderland University, bringing thousands of students and providing academic employment and adding some life and culture to the place, even if it is not Oxbridge. There are multiple hospitals with A&E departments, loads of GP surgeries and clinics, dentists, pharmacies, all the healthcare infrastructure you actually need when you are living somewhere rather than just visiting. Shopping is decent, with all the usual supermarkets, Tesco, Asda, Morrisons, Aldi, Lidl, plus high street chains in the city centre, and the Bridges shopping complex, which is struggling visibly and half empty but still functionally providing retail space. The Stadium of Light is there for football fans, a pretty decent stadium, even if Sunderland AFC fortunes vary wildly between mediocre and depressing depending on the season. Transport links exist. The A19 runs past for driving south to Yorkshire or north to Newcastle. Trains to Newcastle take about 20 minutes, and then you have connections everywhere, so you are not completely isolated from the rest of the country. The beaches are actually quite good, proper sandy beaches that stretch for miles north and south, and beach access as a renter paying £450 monthly is genuinely quite remarkable, even if the North Sea is absolutely freezing and the weather is often horrible. But let us be completely honest about why rent is this cheap, because there are very significant downsides that need acknowledging clearly. The job market is tough, really tough. Unemployment is persistently high and has been for decades. Median wages are low at around £23,000 annually, and even that average is pulled up by a few decent jobs. Lots of people earn significantly less. The city has been in economic decline since the shipbuilding industry collapsed in the 1980s, and despite endless talk of regeneration and reinvention and new industries, nothing has really successfully replaced that lost economic base. Crime rates are significantly above the national average. Some areas and estates are properly rough, with visible problems. Drugs and antisocial behavior are genuine issues, not just media exaggeration. The city centre feels quite depressed and struggling, with lots of empty shops and boarded-up units. It has that post-industrial wasteland vibe that is hard to shake psychologically. The weather is brutal, honestly, proper northeast coast conditions, with winds coming straight off the North Sea that will freeze you solid for months. But if you are working remotely, or you have found employment locally, or you are studying, those rent prices mean you could actually save money and build up savings. You would not have to spend your entire life in debt just to have somewhere to live. You could rent a two-bedroom flat for £600 and still have over £1,000 left from a median salary after tax for everything else. That is transformative compared to spending £1,500 on rent in Manchester and having nothing left. Moving to Blackpool, and this one's particularly interesting because it's coastal, which usually means expensive. But Blackpool is so economically struggling that rent is exceptionally cheap. An average one-bedroom flat is about £500 a month. Two-bedroom flats are around £600 to £650, and three-bedroom houses are £700 to £800. You could rent a house near the beach for less than a room in a London house share. The city has about 140,000 people, a proper seaside town with all the classic British seaside infrastructure: the Tower, the pleasure beach, the piers, and the illuminations every autumn. The beach is actually decent, a proper sandy beach that goes on for miles, and having beach access as a renter at that price is genuinely quite special, even if the water is freezing and the weather is often grim. There is stuff to do, entertainment venues and theaters, and the tourist infrastructure makes it more interesting than a random post-industrial town. But there are massive caveats about why it is this cheap. The city is economically struggling. Councils from other areas have placed homeless people and families with complex needs here because accommodation is cheap. Crime rates are shockingly high. Drugs are a massive issue, and some areas are genuinely unsafe. The job market is almost entirely seasonal tourism and hospitality, with minimum wage, 0 hours contracts. Health outcomes are poor, and life expectancy is among the lowest in England. The city has a reputation that is hard to shake, and honestly, a lot of that reputation is deserved. If you can work remotely, if you have income that is not dependent on the local economy, living near the beach at that price can be genuinely attractive. You could save money, enjoy the coastal location when the weather permits, and have financial breathing room that is impossible in expensive cities. Next up is Hull. Rent here is properly affordable for a city of its size. One-bedroom flats average around £500 a month. Two-bedroom flats are £600 to £700. Three-bedroom houses are £800. The city has about 260,000 people, a proper city with a university, hospitals, and cultural venues. It was City of Culture in 2017, which improved some infrastructure. The marina area is quite nice. The old town has character, and there are museums, galleries, and theatres. The big advantage Hull has over a place like Blackpool is that it is a functioning city rather than a declining resort town. There is more economic diversity and more employment options, even if they are not amazing. The university employs staff and brings students who add life to the city. There is actual culture and things to do beyond just existing and hoping things get better. The downsides are similar to other cheap rental cities. The job market is weak and wages are low, with a median of around £22,000. Crime rates are high, some areas are rough, and drugs and antisocial behavior are problems. The city is geographically isolated, stuck out on the Humber estuary, not really on the way to anywhere. The city centre is struggling with empty shops and declining footfall. The weather is fairly grim, exposed to North Sea winds. But £500 for a one-bedroom flat in a city with universities, culture, and museums is genuinely remarkable value. If you are a student, a young professional, or a remote worker, you could have a quality of life that is impossible in expensive cities, actually saving money while living independently. Stoke-on-Trent is another incredibly cheap rental market. One-bedroom flats average around £550. Two-bedroom flats are around £650 to £700. Three-bedroom houses are £800 to £900. The city has about 250,000 people, so it is substantial, and it still has proper infrastructure left over from its pottery industry days. There are museums, theatres, parks, and Staffordshire University brings students, so there is more to do than you might expect from a struggling post-industrial city. The six-town structure is interesting. Hanley, Burslem, Stoke, Longton, Fenton, and Tunstall all merge together, each with its own character and centre. The Potteries shopping centre is in Hanley, and while parts of it are half empty, it is still functional. There are proper independent shops, cafes, and restaurants, enough to make city living interesting rather than just depressing. The surrounding area is quite nice. Staffordshire countryside and the Peak District are not too far. Issues are the standard ones. The job market is weak outside healthcare and education. Wages are low, with a median around £21,000. Crime is above average in some areas, and the city has a reputation for being a bit grim that is hard to shake. Transport links are okay, but not brilliant. The fragmented structure means it does not feel like one cohesive city, which some people find odd. But the rent prices are genuinely transformative for quality of life. A couple, both working full-time on minimum wage, could rent a two-bedroom flat for £700 and still have money left for actually living. That is impossible in most UK cities where rent alone would consume both salaries. Burnley in Lancashire is shockingly cheap. One-bedroom flats go for around £400 a month, two-bedroom flats about £500, and three-bedroom houses from £600 to £700. These are prices that sound like they are from 20 years ago. The town has about 73,000 people, so it is a decent size with proper amenities. There are supermarkets, shops, a market, leisure facilities, the basics you need. The town sits in real Lancashire countryside, with Pendle Hill right there and the Forest of Bowland nearby. The scenery is actually beautiful if you get outside the town itself. Manchester is accessible, about 45 minutes by car or train, so you could commute if you had to, though traffic and rail services can be rough. The downsides are significant though. The job market is weak, unemployment is high, and median wages are very low, around £20,000. Crime rates are concerning, drug use is a problem, and some areas are properly rough. There are social tensions and divisions between communities that sometimes feel uncomfortable. The town centre is struggling with what feels like a dying high street, mostly charity shops and bookmakers. But £400 for a flat is genuinely life-changing if you are currently paying 10 times that for a room in London. If you work remotely or have portable income, you could live in Lancashire countryside for less than most people pay for parking spaces in expensive cities. Middlesbrough is another remarkably cheap city. One-bedroom flats average around £550, two-bedroom flats about £650, and three-bedroom houses range from £750 to £800. The city has about 140,000 people, proper city infrastructure, Teesside University, hospitals, and shopping centres. The city centre has been pedestrianised, and there have been some regeneration attempts, so it is not all doom and gloom. The location is quite good actually. The North York Moors are close for countryside access. The coast is not far, and you are between Newcastle and York for city access when needed. The town has sports facilities, a cinema, restaurants, and cultural venues, enough to make it interesting. The problems are severe though. Crime rates are shockingly high, among the worst in the UK. Drugs are a massive problem, and some areas are genuinely dangerous. The job market is terrible, median wages are around £20,000, and youth unemployment is especially high. Health outcomes are poor. Poverty is visible and widespread. The town's reputation is so negative, it is hard to overcome. But if you can handle the challenges, £550 for your own flat in a city with a university and amenities is remarkable value. You could actually save money and build a future rather than treading water financially while paying extortionate London rent. Bradford is another cheap rental city. One-bedroom flats are around £600. Two-bedroom flats range from £700 to £750, and three-bedroom houses go from £900 to £1,000. The city has 350,000 people, so it is properly large, with solid infrastructure. Bradford University brings students. There are hospitals, museums, including the National Science and Media Museum, and other cultural venues. Bradford is close to Leeds, which is booming, about 15 minutes by train, so you could commute to Leeds jobs while paying Bradford rent, which is significantly cheaper. Commute to Leeds is easy and fast. The countryside around Bradford is beautiful. The Yorkshire Dales are not far and offer dramatic scenery. There are the usual post-industrial issues with high unemployment, low wages, a median income of £24,000, and some areas with serious poverty. Crime rates are concerning in parts, and the city centre is struggling despite regeneration attempts. There are social tensions and divisions between communities that affect the atmosphere. But £600 for a flat in a city with universities, museums, and train access to Leeds is genuinely good value. You could live in a proper city with access to culture and nature, saving significantly compared to living in Leeds itself, where rents are much higher. Newport in Wales offers cheap rent. One-bedroom flats go for about £650, two-bedroom flats about £750, and three-bedroom houses around £900. The city has about 160,000 people with proper city infrastructure. The location is brilliant. Cardiff is right there, about 20 minutes by train, and Bristol is accessible, so you are well connected to major cities. The city has the Transporter Bridge, which is unique and interesting from an engineering perspective. Friars Walk Shopping Centre is relatively new and decent, and there is an improved riverfront area. The surrounding countryside is beautiful, including the Wye Valley and the Brecon Beacons. The problems are that the city can feel like Cardiff's poor relation, overshadowed and struggling to establish its own identity. The city centre outside Friars Walk is quite rough. Crime rates are high, and there are issues with drugs and antisocial behaviour. The job market is weak, though access to Cardiff helps. The nightlife has a reputation for violence and trouble. But £650 for a flat 20 minutes from Cardiff by train is extremely good value. You could work in Cardiff, enjoy city life there, and come home to cheaper rent to save money. It is a strategic choice that makes financial sense, even if Newport itself is rough around the edges. Dundee in Scotland is remarkably affordable. You can find one-bedroom flats for around £650, two-bedroom flats for £750 to £800, and three-bedroom houses for £900 to £1,000. The city has about 150,000 people, and it is a proper city with two universities, Dundee and Abertay, hospitals, and cultural venues, including the V&A, which is genuinely world-class and beautiful. The waterfront has been regenerated and looks quite good, and there is real investment happening. The city also has a tech and gaming industry. Rockstar North has a presence, and there are digital jobs available, unlike in many cheap rental cities. The surrounding area is beautiful, with proper Scottish scenery and access to the Highlands for nature. Edinburgh is an hour and a half by train. Glasgow is similar, so you are connected to Scotland's major cities. Issues are that wages are lower than in Edinburgh or Glasgow, with median pay around £23,000. The city is overshadowed by its more successful neighbours. Some areas have poverty and social problems, and crime rates are above average. The city struggles to retain graduates. They study here and then leave for better opportunities elsewhere. But £650 for a flat in a city with the V&A and 2 universities and real tech jobs is remarkable. If you work in gaming or tech, whether remotely or locally, you could have an amazing quality of life, save money, and enjoy culture, all for rent that is roughly half of what you would pay in Edinburgh. Finally, Birkenhead in the Wirral, technically part of the metropolitan area, but functionally its own place. 1-bedroom flats are around £550, 2-bedroom flats £650, and 3-bedroom houses £750. The area has about 140,000 people and proper infrastructure. This is affordable housing so close to the city. The location is brilliant. Liverpool is right across the Mersey, 10 minutes by tunnel or ferry, 15 minutes by train. You could work in Liverpool, enjoy Liverpool's culture and nightlife, and pay Birkenhead rent. The Wirral has nice bits, coastal areas, countryside, and parks. It is not uniformly grim. Problems are significant. The town is very much Liverpool's poor relation. The town centre is dying. The Pyramids shopping centre is depressing. Crime rates are concerning. Some estates are properly rough. Drugs and poverty are visible, but £550 for a flat 10 minutes from Liverpool is strategically brilliant financially. You could have Liverpool life, Birkenhead rent, save hundreds a month, and actually build financial security while young. So there you have it. 10 UK cities where rent is so genuinely cheap, it sounds completely impossible and potentially fictional. These are places where you could rent an entire flat, an actual self-contained flat with your own space and privacy, for what many people currently pay for a single room in a house share elsewhere in the country, for what used to be considered cheap, but is now completely unattainable for most renters. They are all struggling economically in various ways, dealing with serious and visible problems related to crime, poverty, and economic decline, and they have reputations that make people instinctively reluctant to consider moving there even when they are desperate for affordable housing. But they genuinely represent real financial opportunities, actual viable alternatives for people who are currently trapped in utterly unsustainable, expensive rental markets where they are spending everything they earn just on keeping a roof over their heads. The reality that needs acknowledging honestly is that British rental costs in fashionable or successful cities are genuinely unsustainable for the vast majority of ordinary people earning ordinary wages. If you are spending 60 or 70% of your gross income on rent every month before you have even thought about council tax, utilities, food, transport, and everything else you need to survive, you fundamentally cannot save money for the future. You cannot build any kind of financial security or resilience. You cannot plan for retirement or emergencies or anything beyond immediate survival. You are permanently and precariously one unexpected expense or job loss away from complete disaster and potential homelessness. That is not living. That is barely surviving, and it is a trap that millions of people are currently stuck in with no obvious way out. These cheap rental cities offer a genuine alternative path, a way to actually have financial breathing room and security and the ability to save, even if you have to make very significant compromises on location, prestige, reputation, and probably some lifestyle factors. The trade-offs are real and substantial and need to be considered carefully and honestly. These are not fashionable places where your friends will be impressed you live. They are not going to feature in lifestyle magazines or Instagram location tags. They are not particularly safe or culturally vibrant or economically dynamic or full of opportunities. Some of them are genuinely quite depressing to live in day to day, dealing with visible poverty and social problems and economic decline in ways that affect your quality of life and mental health. But here is the crucial counter-argument. Neither is spending your entire 20s and 30s paying extortionate rent to a landlord while never being able to save for a deposit or build any security or financial future whatsoever. That is also depressing and soul-destroying, just in a different way that involves expensive coffee shops and Instagram-worthy locations, masking underlying financial precarity and stress. At least in cheap rental cities, you would have money left over at the end of the month. You could actually save towards a deposit eventually. You could build an emergency fund. You could invest in your future, retrain, start a business, or do literally anything beyond just treading water financially forever. The mathematics are genuinely compelling if you can make the other factors work. Take someone earning £30,000 gross annually, which is around the UK median wage, pretty average and achievable in lots of jobs. After tax and national insurance, they are taking home about £24,000 annually, £2,000 monthly. In London, or Manchester, or Bristol, paying £1,500 monthly rent for a one-bedroom flat, they have £500 left for everything else: council tax, utilities, food, transport, everything. That's impossible, genuinely unsustainable. People are going into debt, using credit cards, unable to save, or all of the above. That same person, earning the same salary in Sunderland or Hull or Stoke, paying £500 rent for a one-bedroom flat, has £1,500 left each month for everything else. That's transformative, genuinely life-changing. They could save £500 each month easily, have £6,000 saved in a year, build a proper emergency fund, and make a deposit for a house achievable rather than an impossible fantasy. They could retrain, invest in skills, start a business, and have actual financial security and options. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go look at my rent bill and weep. Drop a comment if you've lived in any of these cheap rental cities, whether it was worth the trade-offs, or if you think I've got it completely wrong about somewhere. Either way, cheers for watching, and good luck with the endless rent payments. The question you need to ask yourself honestly is what actually matters more to you: living somewhere fashionable and impressive where you're constantly stressed about money, or living somewhere affordable where you have financial security and can build towards future goals? There is no universally right answer. It depends entirely on your personal priorities, your circumstances, what you value, and what you can tolerate. If you work remotely, this equation changes dramatically in favor of cheap rental cities. If your income is not tied to the local economy, if you are doing software development, or writing or design, or any job that can be done from anywhere with decent internet, then suddenly the local job market concerns become largely irrelevant to your personal situation. You could earn Manchester or London wages while paying Sunderland or Hull rent, getting the best of both worlds financially, and that can transform your financial trajectory over years and decades. Similarly, if you are studying, particularly postgraduate study, these cheap cities become extremely attractive despite their problems. A PhD stipend or a master's loan goes dramatically further when you are paying £450 rent instead of £1,200. You could live reasonably comfortably as a student, have money for books and conferences and research materials, and not be constantly stressed and miserable about finances while completing demanding academic work. Even if you are working locally in these cities, if you can find employment at relatively low wages, the rent savings mean you may still be better off financially than earning more in an expensive city. Someone earning £22,000 in Hull, paying £500 rent, has more disposable income than someone earning £35,000 in Manchester, paying £1,300 rent, even before factoring in that other living costs are generally lower in cheap cities. The communities in these places are also worth considering. Because rent is cheap and housing is affordable, you get a more mixed demographic, not just young professionals and wealthy people, but families, older people, and people on lower incomes. That creates more diverse and arguably more authentic communities compared to gentrified expensive areas where everyone is demographically similar. People who live in these struggling cities often have strong community bonds and mutual support networks that emerge from shared economic hardship, neighborhood connections that are rare in expensive cities where people are isolated in their individual bubbles and too stressed to build relationships. Yes, these cities have problems, serious visible problems, that we should not minimize or ignore. Crime rates matter, and they affect quality of life on a daily basis. Economic decline creates depressing environments psychologically. Limited job opportunities constrain your options if your circumstances change. Social problems and deprivation are distressing to witness and experience. The word to remember here is economic. But expensive cities also have profound problems, just different ones. Unaffordable rent and financial precarity create enormous stress and mental health problems. Lack of community and loneliness are epidemic in expensive cities where everyone is too busy working to pay rent to build relationships. The constant financial pressure of expensive city living destroys people slowly over years. The key contrast is financial. The choice is not between perfect and imperfect. It is between different types of imperfect with different trade-offs. Cheap rental cities offer financial security and breathing room in exchange for accepting location and reputation compromises and for dealing with economic and social challenges. Security is what many people gain from this trade-off. Expensive cities offer prestige and career opportunities and cultural richness in exchange for financial precarity, unaffordable housing, and constant stress. Prestige comes at a cost. For some people, the trade-offs of cheap rental cities will not be worth it under any circumstances. If you are in an industry that only exists in London or Manchester, if you need the cultural amenities of big successful cities, if the social problems of declining cities would genuinely damage your mental health, then paying expensive rent somewhere better might be the only viable option, even though it is financially difficult. That is a legitimate choice. But for many people, especially young people trying to build financial security, remote workers with portable income, students, people between career stages, and retirees on limited budgets, The cheap rental cities we have discussed could genuinely be smart strategic choices that enable financial goals that would be completely impossible in expensive cities. This can be transformative. The ability to save £500 or £800 each month for a few years, building up substantial savings, could be completely transformative for your future options and security. That kind of saving could justify temporary compromises on location. The other factor to consider is that these cheap rental situations probably will not last forever. As more people discover remote work opportunities, as more people get priced out of expensive cities, and as information about these cheap rental havens spreads, demand will increase and rents will rise inevitably. Think time limited. What is £450 now could be £700 in 5 years as these places get discovered and rents normalize upward toward national averages. So there is potentially a time-limited opportunity here to take advantage of genuinely cheap rent before market forces push prices up. The cities themselves might also improve over time, or at least some of them might. If more remote workers and young people with education and skills move to these places, bringing spending power and demanding better services and facilities, the local economies could strengthen, crime could reduce, and amenities could improve, creating a virtuous cycle of regeneration. It has happened before, in previously declining areas that found new economic bases and populations. Manchester and Leeds were struggling post-industrial cities in the 1980s and 90s. Now they are booming with expensive rent and thriving economies because of sustained regeneration and population influx. The example is booming. There is no guarantee that Sunderland or Hull will follow that trajectory, but it is possible, and early movers could benefit enormously. Conversely, these cities could continue declining, they could get worse. The problems could intensify, making the cheap rent not worth the deteriorating quality of life. That is a real risk. You could move to somewhere like Middlesbrough for cheap rent and find that crime gets worse, services deteriorate further, the local economy continues shrinking, and you are stuck somewhere increasingly unpleasant. That outcome would make the low cost of rent not worth it. In the end, this is a values-based trade-off between prestige and financial security. Think about your priorities, your career, your mental health, and your timeline. For many people, moving to a cheap rental city could be a smart, life-changing step. For others, it will not be the right path. Either way, the choice is valid. That risk exists, and it should factor into your decision-making process. The ultimate answer is, there is no single answer. These cheap rental cities represent genuine opportunities for some people, in some circumstances, and terrible ideas for other people in different circumstances. What's crucial is going in with your eyes open.